So Sheri's passionate about, females in STEM, entrepreneurship, making education as good as it can be.
Great, thanks. Am I supposed to use the microphone? Just so I get an understanding of who's in the room, how many of you are bioengineering students and have actually taken, how many of you are bioengineering students? Just raise your hand. And how many of you have taken Indigo before? Most of you. What other, do we have mechanical engineering in here? Yes, we'll go mechanical. Electrical? No? Computer science? Yay! What am I missing? Postdocs?
Lots of
Medicine, life science? I'm just trying to get a sense of who's in the room. Okay, fabulous. Well, this is a real treat and an honor for me to be able to speak to all of you because I really have a belief, which I didn't know growing up much about STEM and never would have considered STEM, but I feel like women in STEM and women bringing their empathy into STEM is one of the ways that we can solve some of our greatest social problems. So it's a real honor to be here with you. So my kind of philosophy about engineers and STEM is that engineers are in a position to change the world. I feel like engineers are really ultimately problem solvers. Do you all identify as problem solvers? Yes, I hope so. Because you really are, you're problem solvers. And I feel like problem solving is one of these 21st century skills, buzzword kind of things that really has a deeper meaning than is what's thrown around. And I'm really counting on you to solve some of these problems because we sure have a lot of them. It's true, we do. So I really, so that's really kind of my frame around STEM. And if I had known that growing up, and I had known that, STEM and all these fields that you're going into in engineering was about solving problems, I might have considered it. Because I did have the ability to do it, but I just thought it was this cold, boring, weird, nerdy, kind of thing. And I didn't like math, and I didn't like school. And so I thought, man, I could never go into some sort of computers or, or engineering or anything like that. And oddly enough, I actually designed the first website for the State Department ever. It was a women's organization in the State Department, and no one knew how to do websites. And so I learned HTML and made this giant website for women around the world. And Hillary Clinton had started it, and she was so happy, but the compliance people yelled at me and said, "You can't make a website for the State Department." And even then, I didn't identify as a person who could do techie things or STEM things, even though I did it. I identified myself as a human person, as someone who was about women's rights, which was what the organization was all about. So even then, it's it wasn't in my mind that STEM and empathy and solving problems were all together. So what I want to do right now is, it's weird, I'm kind of nervous. I speak a lot, but I think I'm nervous because this is really important to me. And I want to share a little bit about my life, something I've never shared before, which also makes me nervous. So I appreciate you bearing with me. But I want to make this interactive, so if you have questions throughout the talk, I want you to be able to ask them. And also I want you guys to have an experience yourselves. So I want to start with the practice of empathy that I've learned. So much in my life, I was worried about when people would say something to me, I was worried about, well, what do I say back, right? Do you ever have that in a conversation? Someone's telling you something, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say back. So you don't actually hear what they say because you're worried so much about saying the right thing back. And for women, I think, especially smart women or women who are seen to be smart, we feel like we have to have the right answer. So there's more pressure on saying the right thing back. So I'm gonna teach you a little trick that I learned that might take the pressure off. And it's called thank you for sharing. Has anyone had this exercise? Now, thank you for sharing can be done in two different ways. One way of thank you for sharing can be thanks for sharing, right? Glad you told me that. I'm really bored, I want to move on. Let's get past this, okay? Another way that you can do thank you for sharing is doing thank you for sharing with an empathy lens, which means I actually don't need to formulate a response to you. I need to fully hear you and try to identify you with why you're saying that, and then say, thank you for sharing. Get the difference? So what I want you to do when you're thinking about yourself as a problem solver, as a powerful woman leader, because I see you all as leaders, or males, thank you for the supportive men in here. I see a few. Thank you very much. I want you to just share with a partner, just in a minute or so, why you went into STEM, why you went into this field. Just a quick synopsis, and if you don't know, share something else, like maybe a moment where you felt proud to be in this field, okay? So just take a minute, share with someone, and then the other person, instead of worrying about what to say, just put on your empathy lens, listen as intently and as completely as you can, and then say, thank you for sharing. Got it? Okay, go. So how was that for you? Fun? Well, tell me more. Tell me a little more. Do you have something to say, Jan?
It was good. We all got the same answer.
Good.
Because we were good at math and science.
Okay. Because you're good at math and science. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? What else did someone? Yes.
I'm not good at math, so I had an opposite answer. We were talking about that and like kind of just what we experienced, like just pushing forward, even though like we're not particularly good at something, but still like wanting to do something just because it like interests us, or like there's different expectations and it's hard to overcome those, but you still keep on going.
Got it, got it. I think I might give you guys probably can't hear each other, can you? Should I give each other the mic?
Sure, you have another mic.
Oh, perfect, another mic. Okay, another comment or thought. How was the empathy part? Did it help at all to not try to think about having a response?
It was very hard not to have a response. It was when we really, well, each of us both said the same thing. We really want to ask questions and we want to know more, and you're saying no. So it's very hard to go, okay.
Well, do they both work? Yes.
Okay, so I can.
Yeah, you pass around. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, that's real empathy, right? Is then having questions, right? I was just giving you that example because sometimes it's hard to have empathy when you're thinking about what you're going to say. And when you actually hear, then you actually come up with better questions. So another trick for that, just so you guys know, is if you're really in your head, just repeat in your mind what that person's saying. It's an interesting trick. Like you can try it right now while I'm talking. I'm doing it to myself right now. You just repeat in your mind everything you're saying, and it's odd because in some ways you can't actually process what's actually being said, but you get it in a different way in your body, and it brings you to presence. So it's an interesting trick that I learned along the way that sharing with you wasn't really part of the talk, but hey, why not? Okay, I am working on being more structured. I'm also a 4 on a scale of 1 to 100 of compliance, which is like structure, rules, things like that. So I am getting better at it. So I'm trying to structure my talk a little bit. And really I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and share it. A piece of my story I've actually never shared publicly before. Don't worry, it's not that dramatic. But an interesting empathy lens, and I was thinking about this. I want to look at some data findings. At Indigo, we actually do, like that report you got back, there's a lot of data underneath it. And we've uncovered some interesting data around empathy in STEM. And then I want to talk more about the importance of empathy in STEM, and then what you can do to practice now. Sound good? Okay. All right. So I feel like whenever I get asked to speak, it's timely for me. I hardly ever give the same talk twice. And I like to share about things that I'm personally working on, because whenever I'm listening to speakers, I feel like they're like too polished, too perfect. You know what I mean? I don't really trust them when they're too perfect. Well, it's like they're too perfect to be trusted. And I really never want to be that person, because I'm all about celebrating the imperfections and like our differences and the grittiness and like getting in there with people. So I always like to share something that's like personally up for me. And what's been up for me is figuring out my leadership. Like, I'm a CEO of a company. We're starting to finally grow. It's been 5 years of really been really hard. And we've got 16 people now, and I'm like, okay, how do I want to be a leader? I'm getting asked to speak more. And so for me, my leadership is really about these three things up here: empathy, entrepreneurship, and education. And how do those three things kind of fit together? And how do we become leaders in this way? And how do I become a leader in this way? Because I'm an empathetic entrepreneur, which is kind of a weird thing. Although I secretly suspect that a lot of entrepreneurs are empathetic. Anybody in here want to become an entrepreneur? Oh yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, STEM fields is fabulous. It's so easy to commercialize STEM products, and you're really sexy for investors because, like, oh, female and STEM, we're really smart. A lot of the stuff you guys are working on can be commercialized and, make an insane amount of money. So you should really think about it if you're not thinking about that. But I feel like I have a secret suspicion, though, that actually more entrepreneurs are empathetic. Mental health issues are actually higher among entrepreneurs. And I think it's a lot of us feel different growing up, and we feel a lot, but we don't, but the way business works and the way our systems work is not set up around empathy. And education in and of itself is pretty much not, like, you have to be anti-empathetic to succeed in education. It's about sit down, shut up, do what you're told. It's not about connection. It's not about innovation. It's not about new ideas. And it's like, oh, I'm trying to embody this idea that we're trying to bring into the world. So I'll tell you a little bit about my life. That was me. Oh, no, I put it in the wrong order. That's fine. Okay, this is the town I grew up in. Carson City, Michigan. Doesn't it look glamorous? Doesn't it look exciting? This is where I spent most of my time growing up, Carson City Public Library. The town looked like this literally 30 years ago, and this is a picture from like last year. It's exactly the same. Although sadly, I think there was something in this shop here 30 years ago, and now it's even less. So this is a 1,200 person town in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. My dad was a prison guard, never went to college, although he did go back in his 40s, and I'm very proud of him. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so really pretty, very traditional rural upbringing. This was me, about 2 or 3. I was a little rebel. I was always causing trouble. My mom said she read all these books about how to deal with the defiant child and all this kind of crazy stuff. But in addition to being a rebel, which I think comes from my entrepreneur side, I was also highly empathic. I actually think when I was really young, I was an empath. And one of my mentors, I think it's really important to have mentors, by the way. It's harder to get them than you would think. So if you find one, you keep them, okay? And I think as for women in here who are a little bit older, becoming a mentor for another woman, I think is a really valuable thing. So I have a female mentor who's a doctor. Oddly enough, all my best friends are in STEM. Interesting. So anyway, she helped me relive this memory, because she has this whole thing about going back to your very first memory and seeing what it tells you about your leadership and about yourself. And my first memory, interestingly enough, was about a little baby bird. Is he up there? There he is. That's what he looked like. So this little baby bird had fallen out of the tree, and I really wanted to save it. And I thought my dad was a god, which he probably wishes I still thought that about him. Dad died that day. And I thought, oh, if my dad gets home, the little baby bird's gonna be okay, and he's gonna be able to save it, and I'm gonna be able to help this baby bird. And so, this is the beginning of the day, my dad was working, and so I laid on the ground, nose to nose with this bird. I was a little tiny person myself, and just stared at its little eyeball until it died. And my mom tried to get me to move. She's like, oh, she's gonna be so traumatized. And I was like, no, I am gonna stay with this baby bird. And it was strange because I always thought of it as a traumatic memory, because it was too young for me to think about death or understand death. And I I was really disappointed in my father, and then my father yelled at my mother for letting me stay next to the bird all day, like this whole drama around it. But really, my mentor said, no, that's your leadership. You stay with people in their pain. You feel them, you connect to them, you look at them deep in their eyes. And that's who you are, and that's where your power is. And I've been spending a whole lot of years trying to figure out how to get back to that little girl when I was 3 years old, because life really beat that out of me. And I learned pretty early on, I got all the wrong messages, that my empathy wasn't actually powerful. I felt like it made me weak. And I felt like people didn't value it. And so I spent a lot of time beating it out of myself, and then a lot of time getting it back. And I'm still trying to get it back. But I'm getting there. And so I don't know. I just felt like I needed to share that story. So, what happened next? Okay, we're gonna fast forward. Super high achieving, valedictorian, graduated a year early, thought that I was gonna be this like really strong, high D, high dominance, which is like another Indigo thing. It's the red bars, dominance. I'm 96 out of 100, so I was like, I'm really aggressive, really competitive. So, I went to some good schools, I got a good education, and really I didn't know who I was. My identity was this like high achieving, person, but I didn't know why I was doing it, and I had kind of killed that part of me that I think actually made me powerful. And so the journey to getting back to who I was is the journey that brought me to Indigo. And you guys can ask me any questions about it later, but this talk will take forever if I tell you about my life. But I really wanted to highlight that if you think about yourself and like pieces of yourself when you were young, like there might be parts of you that actually the world needs and the industry needs that the world might have given you the wrong message about. And I really hope if you can see how important empathy is, that you can bring those parts back. Okay. All right. So I want to start in the data section with a dear friend of mine, Kristen Shepard. She's a civil engineer for the city of Boulder, and she taught me about empathy in the last, I've known her like 8-9 years now, more than probably anybody I know. And she had a very, very difficult childhood. I mean, when you think of like the worst childhood imaginable, that was her childhood. And she's also an empath and an engineer, and something we talk about a lot is what it's like getting through school as an empath, as an engineer, and then being in the field. And she's got a good message that I think is worth listening to.
Everything has an equation. Everything that we touch and feel and perceive in the world is driven by a mathematical equation. The importance of empathy in STEM is that STEM fields are predominantly or have been mostly influenced by men. But the feminine or female aspects in STEM, we bring a different perspective. It changes the way that we perceive reality when we put in a different lens of empathy. So what I mean by that is you can build things that are functional in terms of like, this is a concrete bench, right? So that you can just put in a concrete block, or you can design it in a specific way that invites people to sit and talk. There's design elements that you can incorporate that encourage community and spaciousness and beauty and aestheticism that I feel like when you're going strictly from an analytical brain side, you kind of miss that part of it. When you look at something in technology or in design, and you come at it from a place from like a heart and soul level, it changes the way that that thing that you're building feels to others and the way that it's utilized. It's about cultivating connection with others.
I feel like this world needs a lot more connection. And if we take the time to create connection, that we actually build better solutions to problems, and we're actually even thinking about the problem in a way that we can create a solution. So but I want to highlight a little bit about why I think it's so hard to have empathy in STEM and why STEM education is kind of right at this moment leading us the wrong direction. So as I said before, we do data at Indigo. And one of the things we want to do is we want to use our data for good, not to blame or not to say someone's wrong or not to even categorize everybody into the big blanket of the data. So you might look at some of this data and be like, well, that's not me. That's okay, it's probably not you. it just shows us trends that allow us to make better decisions, all right? So if you have any questions about it as we go along, I'll let you know. So, just a quick question. What percentage of women in universities do you think are motivated by making a difference in the world? So we measure motivations at Indigo and how passionate people are about certain things that they're motivated by. So for women in universities, what percentage do you think are motivated this way? 80? It's actually not that high. There's 6 motivators, right? So it's hard to be, and it has to be in the top 2 of their motivators in order to be in this percentage. It's 53%. Yeah. So here's an interesting chart, okay? So the way we have these 6 motivators. They're over here. Theoretical, which is learning for the sake of learning. Individualistic, which is, that's really the entrepreneur motivator. It's like being out front, thinking outside the box. Also, like a lot of performers are individualistic. Utilitarian, which is money, efficiency, practicality. Social, which is the helping. It's not talking. It's helping, making a difference in the world. Aesthetic, which is beauty, harmony, making something look good. Like as you can notice, like Kristen, the person in the video, she's very high aesthetic. And then traditional, which is, family values, culture. A lot of people in the military are high traditional, things like that. So the thing that I want to highlight here, so first of all, I want to note that the norms of the university students is like thousands and thousands of university students. The faculty, because I was in a hurry for this thing, I only had one data set that was available to me. So this is only 19 engineering professors. So this is not representative of all engineering professors. And we would like to actually write an NSF grant to do a huge research study on this. So if anyone knows how to do that, any postdocs, PhD candidates in here, you can talk to me. We have to figure this out. But the thing I want to point out here is, first of all, when you look at men and women, there's some huge differences in their motivators, right? What do you guys see? What do you guys say?
More individualistic.
More individualistic? Yes.
It seems more distributed.
Yep. What do you mean more distributed?
Like it's just like it is in the values averaging out. I was looking at the wrong column.
Yeah. And so the reason why this doesn't add up to 100 in every, or the way that this looks at it is these are the top 2 motivators. So everyone has all 6. And then it's like the things that motivate you most, right? So interestingly, of the faculty that I looked at on that data set, and this is true of like, when I think about the faculty data sets I've looked at for all of our engineering programs, this is pretty true. There might be a couple that weren't high theoretical, but engineering faculty members are high theoretical, and it makes sense. They have to be. You have to write papers, you gotta go through a million years of school, you have to, teach, you gotta love learning. So it makes sense, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? The only thing that might be hard about that is when they don't understand there's other motivators that may be valuable in the workplace, okay? The thing that I wanted to point out is this aesthetic, this social aesthetic. And this is really where I feel like STEM education, if STEM education focused more on social, which is making a difference in the world, and valued aesthetic, which is how things look. And if you think about your assignments, I mean, when are you ever graded on whether or not something helps people or looks pretty? Never, right? Or very rarely, right? So I actually think we could attract and retain more women if we focus on these 2 motivators. Okay, so that's kind of one of my theories and something I'd like to do more research on. Any thoughts or comments about that? Nothing? No comments? Okay, that's fine. I think it's pretty interesting.
I just said I had said.
I'd love to do more research on this, but I do think, yes?
You might find something interesting too if you looked at like the different engineering volunteer organizations like Engineers Without Borders or things like that. where like part of their mission is building these socially responsible engineers, it might be an interesting cohort of students to look at to see if their motivators are different.
Yeah, actually, I saved 3 girls that were going to drop out of engineering last year in California. They were meeting with me and they're like, we don't think we're going to be good engineers. We don't really like engineering. And they're all high social. I said, have you ever heard of Engineers Without Borders? And they're like Googling it. They're like, oh, we want to do this. So I think that's a really good, I'd love to do more research with that, Michelle.
I just want to say I'm surprised that aesthetics aren't considered more part of STEM and especially engineering, because I think aesthetic is something that's very important in engineering and is maybe overlooked sometimes. But there's a lot of room for, designing things in a appealing or pleasant looking way that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of when they think engineering.
Totally, and I think that's what that STEAM thing is trying to do, like bring in more aesthetics. And I think I always use Apple as a good example. Like I think one of the reasons why Apple succeeds is they really value that aesthetic, whereas like Microsoft or IBM doesn't. So I think that's a really good point. Yes, back there, Casey, can you give her this? No.
I was just going to say sometimes I feel that when you're taking a test like Indigo, you automatically get into a different mindset. And at least for me, I feel like my goals kind of change and I shy away from saying certain things on there, or like, oh, the people who are analyzing this test, were they thinking about this? And the fact that I'm a woman and this and that. And I think I, in every situation, tend to overthink things, and it affects the result of my test. So maybe others have experienced something similar to this, I don't know.
No, that's a really good point. In fact, that actually proves my point. Because we don't want women like you being like, oh, I have to answer it differently. Because like that's not valued in the field. Like we want women like you to be like, whatever you are, right? Even if you are high theoretical, to like could be completely own it and like not feel like you have to change your questions. Yeah, that's one of our missions. Okay, we'll go to the next slide here. All right, so I do feel like engineering education favors theoretical learning. And I put the utilitarian up here. I like looking at distributions. It's funny because I thought I hated math, but now I do math with humans. I love math. I actually wrote a whole AI algorithm that uses Indigo data and patterns, and I was like, whoa, I wrote an AI algorithm, this is amazing. Because like math is really cool when it's like applied to something real, but like that's not how it's taught, right? Because so often I feel like STEM fields are taught with this theoretical lens, right? It's just, even of the students, like very few of the university students are ultra low theoretical, but it's mainly because they don't go to university. It's not because there are not high theoreticals, low theoreticals out there being successful, they're just not going to university. Because university is really a theoretical kind of, seen as a theoretical kind of place. And I also feel like utilitarian is interesting to look at because I think making things more practical, more real, more hands-on will not only engage the women, but really engage the men, and it's a pathway through making the theory something applicable, and then any motivator can work when you make things real world, because the real world has all of the motivators moving all the time. Okay, any questions about this data slide? Okay. So I think we have a lot of work to do with empathy in general in universities, not just engineering fields. So if you look at this distribution curve here, so there's a whole lot of people who score under 0.6 on a scale of 1 to 10 in empathy. And that doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to be empathy. That doesn't mean they're not empathetic humans. It just means they don't identify with the skill of being empathetic, which I thought is interesting. And the distribution curve is really slanted this way, especially with men. But I think we have a lot of work to do to get it up higher, something that I'm personally motivated by. Thoughts on this?
Can you just explain what you just said a little bit more. So I think that for those individuals who have taken Indigo, sometimes there's this question of like, what does it mean when my skill shows low? Like,
Yep.
can you elaborate that?
Yeah, so the way that we measure skills is mainly, it usually shows up if people have experience with it. So if you have experience with the skill and you feel competent at doing that skill, then you would come up with a high score. If you don't have experience with the skill, you would just come up with a low score because it's just not something you do. So like empathy is just not part of the thing you do. It would be low whether or not you are good at empathy or not. And then the other thing we see is if you dislike a skill, so there's a lot of people who are very good writers, for example, and the way we measure written communication, they don't like writing, that would still show up low as a skill. So it shows both experience and how someone feels about the skill. So empathy is not a skill that most university students feel comfortable doing or feel competent doing. Doesn't mean they don't have it. Did I explain that good enough, Casey?
Yeah.
Okay. Some more missing skills in STEM. I don't think any of these will surprise you. I think a lot of engineering programs are working on these skills. Written communication, I feel like it's not that important as far as what I'm after. But this is sort of like, this is the like working adult average here. And then this is the distribution. So as you can see, the distributions are pretty far back on all of these. Interpersonal skills, this was a smaller data set. A lot of people identify as having 0 interpersonal skills, which I think is sad.
What's an interpersonal skill? What is that? Like,
interpersonal skills is the ability to interact with somebody in a meaningful way. So, like if you're having conflict, how do you deal with that? If you're trying to work through a goal, how do you deal with that? That kind of thing. It's not just like being friendly or being nice. Okay. Okay, so to kind of recap, so what I feel like the data is highlighting is that bringing this into awareness really makes a difference, and that you not shutting your empathy down and you talking to your professors, and us, Indigo, one of the things we do is talk to professors. One of my favorite engineering professors we've been working with for about 5 years, his empathy skill score has gone up like 6 points. Like when I first met him, it was like a 0, and now it's like a 6. I mean, it's amazing. And not that he's changed who he was, he just has so much more awareness, and the way he deals with his students and the way he thinks about the way he delivers the education has really shifted. And so I feel like if we continue to put this focus not only in education, but if we continue to stand up for it ourselves, and then we get industry to buy into this, which I think industry is starting to buy into it, because industry knows like teamwork in engineers is necessary. It's a complete imperative at this point. You are going to be working on a team. So industry is starting to get there. I think we can transform this field rather quickly, which allows it to be more inclusive and diverse, and then allows us to solve better problems. And the reason why I think empathy matters is this graphic up here. I feel like this is a waterway that's built without empathy. I've seen these in Phoenix. Have you ever seen these in Phoenix? They're really ugly. This is Boulder Creek. Did you guys know that Boulder Creek was engineered? Did anyone know that? You knew that, Kelly. You knew that? Most people didn't know Boulder Creek was engineered. I didn't know it was engineered until my friend Kristen, who is an engineer in Boulder on the floodplain, it's like, no, Boulder Creek was engineered. That, I feel like, is a really good example of engineering with empathy, and aesthetic, and social, and all these other things. And there's a real difference, like which engineered waterway would you rather live next to? It's kind of an obvious question. All right, so I want to practice a little bit more about the empathy, and I'll take a few questions. So the thing about empathy is it's not actually something you can learn with your mind. It's something that lives in your heart, it lives in your body. You have to let go of knowing in order to be empathetic. You have to be in the felt experience. And I know that we want to stay in our minds because it's a lot safer. And all of our education is about our mind, right? So we're programmed to live in our mind. So we're gonna just kind of think about some ways we can do this without our mind. So you have to let go of what's supposed to be in order to have empathy. So we're gonna do a little bit of a game here. So I want you to imagine a desk. Do you imagine this? Do you imagine this? All right. What about this? This is kind of a more exciting desk. I've been to a lot of high schools, and they have desks like that, and they go around to me, and they're like, we have cutting-edge desks. Our desks are amazing. I'm like, wow, that's great. That's great. I'm glad you moved on from the 1906 desk that most schools still have. What about this? This is Indigo's office. What about those? We have a lot of different kinds of desks there, right? Got different kinds of desks. This is my desk at home. This is my old dog who sadly just passed away, and it's a treadmill desk. So I walk on my little treadmill when I'm not in my office, and I walk all day. Sometimes I walk like 8-9 miles a day. That's my desk. Some people think I'm weird. Some people say that's not very productive. I actually think I'm more productive on my little weird desk, but that's my desk. What about here? There's a university in Boulder called Watson University. They live at Chautauqua. Anyone ever heard of them? Most of them, this is their desk. They're out in the woods, they're hiking, they're imagining new social enterprises. It's an awesome university. I freaking love it. That's their desk. And what about a desk not even being in this reality? So one of our nonprofit partners called Labaki, they go into low-income areas, inner city areas, and they teach kids how to create virtual reality. They create whatever desk they want. I think in the future, kids are going to be meeting in the metaverse, like on the top of cliffs. They're going to be meeting in the Amazon. They're going to be meeting underwater. I don't know where they're going to meet. It's like these kids are going to come up with more interesting things than I could ever come up with. So the idea of a desk might not even be real. And so when we think about that, it's like, wow. Like we can let go of what we know and imagine another reality. And if that reality is imagined with empathy, then that reality will be a better place for all. And that's really why we do our work. So we're gonna practice empathy now. And I love this quote by Leonardo da Vinci. This guy was like, this was 500 years ago, you know? I mean, wasn't he like 500 years ago? Yeah, like 500 years ago. He was like imagining all sorts of stuff we have today. He still inspires people. Like he would never have thought that in 500 years he'd still be inspiring people and he would still be on the cutting edge of innovation and imagining new realities. So I'm gonna have you do another empathy exercise, which could be a little edgy, but it's about you making up something that's positive, nothing negative, by the way, about your partner. It could be the same partner, you could pick another partner. So what I want you to do is we're gonna I'll just time it, I gotta get my little phone here. Where's my phone? I don't know where it is. I'll just time it by the clock. You're gonna have like 15, 20 seconds. And this is gonna be hard, so you have to look at each other. Just look at each other in the eyes for like 15 seconds in silence. And make up something, imagine something about them. Are they a generous soul? Are they a powerful leader? Do you see them? Are you getting an image? I told one woman once that, wow, I was like, you're a Black Panther with purple eyes, right? And she was like, that actually had so much meaning to me. Like you can get intuitive hits about people, right? So I want you to give them a compliment that's not based on reality. That's based on something you see, and you can take a leap, and they might think you're crazy, but it's a good practice. It's just a practice. We're all experimenting, okay? Okay, so find your partner, and then I'm gonna hit go. 15 seconds. Yes.
All right, so I am a wizard with a huge staff standing on top of the mountain, and there's lightning and the storm going on, and I'm super powerful. Wow. How about that?
You're good at this. Who else got some? That's a hard one to beat.
Yeah, that's what we
thought.
You don't have to tell them. Maybe just say how it felt or what you learned from it.
Okay, well, I see you painting watercolor pictures of natural landscapes.
Cool.
You do like painting.
Good stuff. It's fascinating.
Well, Mallory said I was purple. Like there's a purple color floating around me. And I really like that color, so that's great. But also we were talking about how little we actually look into each other's eyes.
Yeah.
And we were like, wow, you have beautiful eyes.
Right.
Who knew? So I think that now I'm gonna try to look into people's eyes more.
I love it. And I love doing this. Like sometimes it seems weird when you do it with mixed company, but you do it with all women or mostly women. It seems a little less edgy. So that's why I decided to do this. Anything else? Any other thoughts, comments? If you thought it was weird, it's okay.
We were talking about how we could like not just laugh and look at each other, and it was weird.
But in a good way.
Like yeah.
Well, maybe what you were seeing is some humor or lightness or fun, or maybe you were just uncomfortable.
And we also have pictures, so we're also like,
Okay. Okay.
We just felt that it was very uncomfortable to just look at each other's eyes for 15 seconds. It was a long time. I think that generally we look at people and it's 5 seconds maybe, and then you look away or look down.
Yeah, it was a long time, and it's funny, see, everyone's talking now because it was kind of uncomfortable, so people need a break. People need like an outlet. So yes, it is uncomfortable. We don't do it, but should it be uncomfortable, right? It's just because it's not part of our culture, it's not part of our psyche, Okay, so I'm going to close, and then we have a couple minutes for questions. But really, I just want to close with this idea that diverse strengths matter. So I know I've been highlighting things that I think are valuable, like empathy and being of service and aesthetic values, but really we need all kinds. We need those ultra-high theoreticals. We need those utilitarians. We need those people who are trying to make $1 billion, right? We need all of the people, and diverse strengths really matter. And this picture actually is a group of mentors that I worked with in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is in the Delta, which is the poorest part of the poorest state in the country. And these people had never been together in a room. And it's a highly racially segregated place, a lot of institutional issues there. But it was just such a beautiful group of people that were dedicated to transforming the town. And like when they got together and held hands, like it was just such a beautiful moment. And I know it's hard to convey, you guys weren't there, but like to me, this picture in my mind deeply illustrates this idea that diverse strengths matter. And I do have a lot of hope for our country, even though we kind of live in a crazy time. I have a lot of hope in our country, mainly because I work with young people. Not that us old folks I'm older than I look. Not that, the older generation is gone, but I feel like the younger generation, like you guys have so much to offer, and you do think about the world differently, and I'm really grateful that you're coming behind us and that you care about things like going to a Women in Innovation Day and listening to me yak for an hour. So thank you very much, and I have a couple minutes for questions if anybody has any.
Hi, thank you. That was great.
yes.
So I'm wondering if you have any advice for how to tap into somebody's empathy, like in the workplace, for example.
So the workplace is harder.
Yes.
So I can tell you advice for how to start practicing. So when I was in my early 20s, I was in an abusive marriage, and I was in a very, very cult-like, legalistic, religious group. And when I broke out of that group, I realized that I didn't know how to interact with anybody. So I moved to Vail, of course, because Vail's like party town, and it's really fun, and you can be totally anonymous there. And I just started practicing with strangers. I'd go up to people in the bar and like make up something about them and like see how it lands. Doesn't really matter if it doesn't land or not, because I don't know them, they don't know me, and they're having fun anyway. So I mean, I used to like wear different outfits and like take on different personas. I mean, you guys are gonna think I'm crazier than I already am. But really, I did a lot of like experiments to like hone my version in a safe place. And then in the workplace, you know, what I really learned is, first of all, you have to get someone one-on-one is a lot better. And like just ask them powerful questions. Like try to ask them about something that's not related to work and get an insight into what they care about, and then leverage that in empathy at work. And then even in meetings and things, just standing up. If like the meeting is not empathetic or not going, just be like, look, I don't feel comfortable. I mean, the great thing about the Me Too movement is you can say whatever you want and they're gonna listen to you because it's made people hypersensitive, right? And I think that's a good thing because it allows more friction in the system and it allows you the ability to speak up, not to be angry or not to whatever, but to turn people in a different way and reorient people towards something that really matters. I don't know if that was helpful at all. Okay. Oh, by the way, if anyone wants to contact me, here's my info. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, we have one over here.
Probably just ask.
Yeah,
so, what would you like? What are some like strategies you have for like cultivating a sense of empathy or exercising your empathy? I guess so, like in day-to-day work environment, I guess.
Yes. So the best thing to do is to feel in your body. So whenever you're in a spot where you feel uncomfortable, or you feel elated, or you feel whatever you're feeling, say, where does this lie in my body? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my chest? That sounds weird. But like when you go into your body, you're actually like accessing empathy points. And then when you can make like the word pictures, like the wizard thing, and the watercolors and the purple, and when you can put word pictures to things, that cultivates empathy as well. So body and word pictures. There's probably a million other things, but that's what I do. You could probably think of a million other things too if I thought about it long enough. Yes?
So how do you reconcile, we've talked about engineering.
Yes.
And we've talked about the value of art and nature. Very clear to me where that's important, empathy is important in something like engineering. I can also see it in the business community. Colorado Business Committee for the Arts has done incredible studies every 2 years that show the economic impact of the arts, so many aspects of the arts on business. Then you look at the medical field, and our rewards are not necessarily with empathy. I mean, you can say bedside manner, but really we are measured by outcomes, patient outcomes. And I guess you could link that, like probably the closest I can link it is medication adherence, maybe. But again, we're not rewarded for that. Well, how do you reconcile that?
Oh man, that is like the question of the century. I think the reason why we're so slow to change as a society is because we're not rewarded for those things, like engineering education, like the way we do medicine, like the way we do education. So I think it's going to take a village, and it's going to take some people creating new systems that do reward those things. But then, so you have to like live in the world, but like not be of the world. So like, yes, you have to hold your outcomes. And this is what I'm struggling with. I don't actually have an answer, but as a leader of a company who's trying to raise money, I struggle with raising money because investors are like, you care too much about the vision. You're a woman, right? They would never say that, they really think that. And so it's this idea of like, how do I operate in this world that it has systems that are structured, but like still be me? And I don't have a good answer for that, but I know it doesn't mean sell out. I know it means continuing to do the empathy thing while you're also meeting the requirements and outcomes you have to require in these systems that are broken.
Are there other countries or something like that you could say like they're better at aligning those incentives?
I have no idea.
Norway.
I mean, Finland has a better education system, right? And they have way less standardized tests, and they have a lot of issues. But as far as a country that does this well. I don't know. I mean, you think America's bad, but we're way better than a lot of countries. So I don't know. It's a really challenging problem, and we have to work together. And I'm not going to have the solutions. Yes, one. I think last question.
Just a quick question. Well, I was just curious how you see education and empathy converging. Like, what kind of actions would you take to get that to actually happen?
Yeah, so there is an organization called Education Reimagined in K-12 that focuses on learner-centered education. And I think they're doing a really good job. They've created a vision document that aligns this whole empathy thing. And I also feel like actually industry could do a lot more to converge, especially in higher ed, because if industry demands like a different kind of learner and different credentialing and values different kinds of credentialing, then this system will shift faster. But again, this is a obviously very complicated problem. Thank you all, I appreciate it.